Hello everyone, my name's Paul Conroy. Before we get into things, I just want to make sure that everyone is close enough to the screen to be able to see what we're going to be doing. I know at the back half of the stage it's a little bit hard, so we're going to spend the majority of it. This is a technical session, so we're going to be doing a demo-driven session. So if you're up the back and you find it hard to read, take this opportunity now to move up the front. There's plenty of seats up the front, a few people moving down. So yeah, if during the session you do see it hard to read it, feel free to move up because there's plenty of seats with spaces in between to go and see the demo-driven session that we're going to do.
We do have giveaways as well, and we can't throw them that far back.
All right, so if you want a forefront jacket, then please come up to the front as well. Okay, great to see so many people into a session after the Fiesta party, so thanks for your perseverance from coming along. Like I said, my name's Paul. I'm a tech specialist in the identity management workload. I'm presenting with my colleague Chris.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Chris Luludakis, and I'm a solution specialist for identity and access management. In fact, both Paul and I cover both the Australian and the New Zealand territories, so we kind of feel like we are locals, even though we live in Australia.
So with the agenda, we're going to cover a lot in this 1 hour session, so we're going to get right into it. Like I said, it's going to be mainly a technical deep dive. What we're going to cover is the solution, which is Forefront Identity Manager 2010. It's pretty exciting because it's a new product, a new solution, but it's an iteration of an older one known as Identity Lifecycle Manager 2007, which I know many people in the audience would have been either familiar with or have deployed in their organisation before. So FIM, as we'll call it through the session, is actually the latest version of ILM 2007, which was a newer version of Microsoft Identity Integration Server 2003, MIIS. So as you see, Microsoft has had a long history in this, but there's a brand new solution out, so that's exciting to talk about. What we're specifically going to be talking about are provisioning with this new solution, adding new users into an environment which is not just Active Directory, but a heterogeneous environment, so provisioning new users, dealing with the workflows to provide those users into your organisation with control. So what we're going to show as part of the demonstration is adding a new user to the organisation and also setting up a workflow which says if we add a new lawyer into the organisation, an email goes out to the head of the legal team or the head of HR or that person's manager before they're provisioned into the system. What we're also going to do is credential management as well. ILM 2007 as well as FIM dealt with digital certificates, but we know that not every organisation uses digital certificates as their credentials. Quite often it's a password-only environment or at least a mix of smart cards with digital certificates and passwords. So we'll show you how to provision and also do password resets with or user self-service password resets, so it isn't a help desk call through to the organisation. Finally, we're going to talk about attribute management, the concept of a white pages where people can actually manage their own attributes, which then flows into the connected directories. So we're going to cover all of this in an hour, which is going to be very practical, very demo-oriented, so we're going to move quite quickly. We're going to take questions throughout the session, but we're only going to take a couple of questions for each section, and we'll take further questions at the end at the recharge bar so we can fit as much content as we can into 1 hour. With that, I'll just show you a quick video to show you the ideal situation that we try to achieve with an identity management solution. Now I know this is a technical session, a technical audience, and this is at a very high level presentation, so it's a little bit like waving a red rag at a bull, but I think it's worth it to show you a best practice scenario. Honestly, the reason why I show you this one is a lot of Microsoft envisioning videos are all things that we'd love to do in 5 years' time. It's like you've probably seen the productivity one where someone's working through an airport and everything's magically coming together. This video is not like that in that every single solution in this video is available now. So it's not necessarily just FIM. There's a few other solutions in there, but they're all available solutions currently. So this video has a little bit of audio with it, so hopefully we've got the audio. If you can take it away, Chris. Ooh, we haven't got the audio. And we'll just redo that one. Sorry about that, we'll just redo it. That's a technical term for WTF.
Okay, try there.
All right, we'll go again.
While clearing her desk, Rebecca packs her network access
Mute
card,
button.
her company
All right, we'll
mobile
just run it back
phone,
to the
and
start. Okay, third time lucky. Thanks for your perseverance.
it's Rebecca's last day at work. While clearing her desk, Rebecca packs her network access card, her company mobile phone and laptop. These all contain sensitive information that can pose a serious financial risk to the company. Take Rebecca's network card, for instance. She can access all of the company's information remotely. This could create risks at the heart of the company. It's also Mark's last day at work. This is Mark's boss, Gary. He has an instant deprovisioning system. This means all of Mark's access to any secure network is immediately removed. As easily as Mark is deprovisioned, Rebecca, starting her new job, is provisioned with network access, building access, as well as privileged resources and customer account information. She can be up and running quickly, effectively, and all with just a few clicks. And Mark's old company can feel secure that he no longer poses a security risk. Even if Mark seems to think otherwise.
So with that, I'll hand over to Chris to talk about best practices.
Thanks, Paul. I really love that video because it does capture the essence of what identity and access management is about. Not only the creation of the user or the deletion of the user once they've gone, but also the role changes. There was kind of a subliminal message there also about, after that person left, not only did the swipe card access not work, but also the data that he had on the USB key that he walked out with were able to actually stop him from being able to access that, even if that data walks out the door. So as Paul said, that they are solutions which exist today. In my role as a solution specialist, I get to work with customers and help them define their identity and access management strategy, and I guess help them execute on that, either through partners or through their own internal development, etc. One of the questions that I often ask when we're kind of starting an engagement is, what are the goals? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And there's kind of some recurring themes that they often talk about. So customers say, well, I'm looking to kind of empower my users. Maybe they don't use exactly those words, but what they want to do is they want to take away the dependency of IT in this whole process, put the business back into control. I'll give you an example. I was working with a customer, or a casino over in Australia, and they wanted to do some stuff around role-based access control. And what they actually found is that there was 7,000 staff and something like 6,000 unique roles. So that was, from a role-based access point of view, it was just a really difficult sort of scenario to deal with, having to go through and define what applications everybody needs. From an IT perspective, that was difficult, but the business already knows what applications that they need. So if they could kind of push the control back to the business, that was going to simplify their environment and certainly lower the cost of doing their deployment, lower the cost to market. Another one of the themes is about agility, so they want to make things quick and easy, I guess. So, the example there is, let's say somebody joins a new project team and they need access to a bunch of shares, or they need access to a new application. Typically what they have to do is call the help desk or submit a problem report. Maybe there's, the 24-hour turnaround time. why can't the project manager deal with that? Why can't he be issued with a workflow, or a request and have, the ability to approve it, and then, some action happens? So they're kind of some of the goals that people are looking for. And then finally, around compliance, I know that in New Zealand maybe there's no, dependency on SADA box, or maybe there's a lower dependency, but there's probably, some of the internal compliance requirements, maybe policies that the organisation has defined themselves, or maybe there's some government legislation that needs to be adhered to. The privacy legislation, I know in Australia, for example, there is privacy legislation that we must adhere to. There's 11 privacy principles. One of them actually defines that we have to limit the ability for people to access an application based on their role, so based on the function that they do. Therefore, you can't divulge customer data to staff who aren't required to access that content. So there's kind of some of the recurring themes that that customers are talking about. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at how we can achieve some of these things. So look at the agility, look at some of the self-service scenarios, look at the way that we can start to push control back to the business through things like workflows and self-service, and therefore also help us achieve some of the compliance requirements that we have. So Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about the first module around directory synchronization and some of the meta-directory concepts.
So those of you who are familiar with the older Microsoft solutions will know that connecting different directories is the core of any identity management system. As Microsoft people, we would have loved the world to be a homogeneous environment, to be a Active Directory world, but we know that simply is not the case. So you need a system where you can connect different data stores together. So that may be a legacy mainframe, maybe a IBM DB2, an Oracle database, a generic LDAP directory. So when you provision new users, you want to be able to not only put them into Active Directory, but also take credentials out of Active Directory or any other connected data store, so it's in fact a two-way flow. So in this example here, you can see that you have a meta directory. You can take attributes out of Active Directory, maybe that's the logon information, the domain credentials, and also you perhaps want to take email credentials out of your Exchange system. From there, you want to be able to provision the new user information into your connected data stores. So that can be something like a boutique HR system, SAP, as your HR system, or a finance package, which is only in one particular geography. So from there, that's what Forefront Identity Manager provides at its base. We have a concept which we call management agents. Don't be misled by the naming in the documentation. A management agent has no active component which runs on the target system. It's simply a connector into those disparate data stores. So when we want to provision a new user, we have to get the credentials from the initial source. Now that can be credentials which come from your SAP, your HR system, or Forefront Identity Manager also has a web-based GUI as well, which you can use. But if you've got an existing HR system, I personally believe the far more elegant way to do it is take those credentials out of your existing HR system, do not change your processes that you have, if they work, to provision new users. Once that data is in the GUI or in the HR system, you then want to provision it out. You want to use your identity management system to put any policies onto that, such as when a new engineer joins, maybe they've got a 5 gig mailbox. When a new regular user joins, maybe they've only got a 2 gig mailbox. You apply any policies through the HR system, and then you start provisioning the user out to your connected data stores. If you choose, you can then get certain attributes from those data stores. As I said before, it's a two-way flow that you want to set up. And finally, you want to provision out that new user information into those connected data stores, but this time based on the approvals. So if the finance manager does the approval, you've got a new member of the finance team. If the CEO does an approval, maybe you've got a new member of the senior leadership team. So it's automated, which is important, but it's also based on workflows, so you've got checks and balances which take control of the automation. So So what we're going to run through today is a scenario whereby we have a new user provisioned into the system, and we're going to take you through all the demonstration steps for that. So the first one, we've got a fictional organisation called Woodgrove Bank, and we've got a new user which we're going to call Sonny Bill. For those of you who don't know, Sonny Bill is a Samoan passport holder who's an Australian resident, and he's looking for a brand new job. So we're going to provision Sonny Bill into the new system, and this is a good opportunity to have a look at the demo environment that we've got. So I'll just have a look at the demo environment. This is something you can download yourself. As you can see up here, there are roughly 13 virtual machines, and this is part of the Business Ready Security demonstration environment, which you can download. We've made some modifications to it, but it's primarily what you can download yourself. So I'll give you the links at the end of the session, and it fits on a double-sided DVD. So it's about 8 gigs, so it's a whopping big download, but do it overnight or something like that. And you've got all these virtual machines which are ready to go, except for some modifications we've made for this for your demonstration, but I'll take you through those as we go. So in this particular one, we've got the Stockholm server, which is Windows Server 2008 64-bit. That is a requirement for FIM. The earlier versions were only 32-bit, but that is a hard and fast hardware requirement. So that is the Stockholm server, which we're going to be doing most of the demonstration from. Also here we have the Denver server, which is the domain controller. We're going to be provisioning Exchange mailboxes, so we've got an Exchange server, and we've got a client machine right here with client. It's a Windows 7 machine, which we're going to be doing logons from. So even though it's a large demo environment, just to see the FIM sections, you only need a couple of machines running. If you have all 13 or all dozen machines running, you're able to see every single identity and security solution that Microsoft's got on the table. So that's pretty comprehensive right there. So what we have in the FIM GUI. So what I'm going to do is show you the pretty end of it, provisioning a new user. Then I'll go and show you what's working behind the scenes. So to provision a new user, you can use the HR system as I talked about before, but if you choose to use this GUI, this comes out of the box with the solution. Provisioning new users, you can allow administrators to have access to this portal, or you can delegate access to allow the HR team to have access to this portal. You can expose certain attributes or choose not to expose certain attributes, and Chris is going to show you a little more about that later in the day. And finally, you can allow temps to have access to this, or maybe only full-time employees to have access to it. So we're going to put in Sonny Bill, and we call him SBW for short, account name SBW. And as you can see, there are drop-down boxes which you can define. So in this case, there's only one domain that he can be placed into. You can add photos through there, so we're going to call him a player because he is in more ways than one. And finally, the department is finance, because I think that's, with all the money he's got, that's pretty appropriate for him. Radio buttons can be exposed as well for things like remote access. We won't give him a start date, but we'll call him a full-time employee or a contractor. Okay, we'll put him a contractor for the purposes of the demo. Give him a nice employee ID, and we'll put in manager. And as you can see, you can use a picker to go from there, or you could have gone through a drop-down list and chosen it from all the connected data stores which flow into the FIM database. So there we have it. We should be able to provision a new user into the system. So that's the provisioning process, really simple, but obviously a technical audience, you're going to want to see what works behind the covers. So I am just going to quickly show you what is running here. Here we have a script which is calling upon the FIM synchronization service. Now if you come to the session after lunch, we're going to have a FIM deep dive where we go into some of the finer details of setting up the FIM service, and we show you the architecture. There's a FIM database, there's a synchronization service, there's a meta directory service, so we'll go into more details through there. But at this stage, what we're going to show you is a script which is calling some run profiles on the synchronization service. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of succeeds. provisioning into the HR system is working, provisioning into the FIM service is working, and provisioning into AD is working. So I will just turn off that script and show you what it's doing behind the covers. Now I will open up the synchronization service, which is in fact the main interface into the meta directory. Through the FIM documentation, you'll see the concept of a metaverse, which is essentially a meta directory, which is those connected directories we saw in the diagram before. To connect to these directories, you have what we call management agents. And as you can see in this demo, there's an Active Directory management agent, a FIM management agent, and a HR management agent. So the HR management agent in this case is calling upon a flat file. So you can actually call on comma-separated value files, text-delimited files, and that's what we're using to represent a HR system rather than having a full-blown SAP in there. We have an ADLDS, which we're going to go through in the deep dive session after lunch, so I won't go into that now. So if you want to create a management agent, out of the box there's just over 20 out-of-the-box management agents, and you can see a whole bunch here. I'll just say what I said at the start of the session for any latecomers. If you can't read this, there's plenty of space, seats with gaps in it, so feel free to come down to the front so you'll be able to see this. So if you want to connect to DB2, Oracle, SAP R3 running on a Windows server, you can use the out-of-the-box management agent to connect to these. We understand that this 20 isn't going to cover a heterogeneous environment, especially with a lot of legacy apps. So there are some alternatives if your connected data stores aren't covered in this list. And to be frank, most big organisations, you're not going to cover everything with this. So there's some alternatives. First one, you can take your data out and put it into a text-delimited file. Very quick to do, not necessarily secure. In fact, security implications, depending on the data, could be extreme. But you can take the data out, put it into a flat file, and FIM can consume it based on the text-delimited file management agent. You can also take that same data out of your boutique finance package and put it into a database. You can put it into your SQL database or put it into your Oracle database and can consume it from there. Finally, there is a extensible management agent. So you can use the .NET languages, C# or Visual Basic, to actually create your own extended management agent and call on the APIs from your boutique system, which is a more secure way of doing it, but obviously a lot more work. So if your connected systems aren't covered in this list, then you can go down one of these paths to create your own or create a management agent that can connect to your system. So we've seen the possibilities. Obviously, AD is going to be one that's definitely called upon in most Microsoft organisations. So we'll just have a look at this particular management agent. All right, so this is the classic Active Directory management agent. The first thing that it'll ask for is administrator credentials, which it needs to get access to the data, both pulling data out of AD and putting it into AD. You will then define the actual directory partition. So if we show all, you can see all access to all the directory partitions within that particular directory. We only want one. From there, you start to define the object types. In this example, and I think most of your organisations, you'll probably want to provision users in and out. So the user object is definitely going to be required. You can go to show all. So all the object types within the connected directory are going to be available to you as soon as you provide the domain credentials. So this stuff is automatically populated. You simply have to start ticking what you want to actually provision to and take data from. Now we have attributes. So we've defined at the very minimum the user object, which we want to provision into. So you then define the attributes. Things such as a password, SAM account name, object GUID are definitely going to be provisioned to as part of an Active Directory provisioning. At the end of the section, we'll take a couple of questions. So from there, attribute flows are something we're going to show you a little bit later. And the final part, which is required, are actual extensions to the management agent. In this particular case, we're going to be provisioning passwords, which I'll show you a little bit later, and we're also provisioning to Exchange as well. like I said before, you can use the .NET suite of languages to create your own extensions to the extensible management agent, and it would be here that would be defined. So if you've created your own DLL through the .NET suite of languages and you want to call upon that, it's at this point that you actually define that. So if you have some more complicated logic that you want, for example, the AD management agent to call on, it's here you can actually define it, call on the generic MA, and then make more complicated logic calls from there. All right, I'll cancel out of that so I haven't made any unfortunate changes. So finally, we have the concept of run profiles. We've created the management agents, which are essentially pipes to the connected data stores. There's no flow between those pipes. The management agents set up the rules for that data to flow up and down those pipes. For an import, obviously, it's importing data from the connected data store. It's also, in the first instance, importing the schema configuration from that connected data store, in this case AD. Synchronization synchronizes the data from the staging area, which is called the connector space, into the metaverse. So it's essentially synchronizing the data with any other rules, any other connected data stores. If there's more than one Sonny Bill Williams, it'll go through the logic and change any details, his capitalization of his name, any other details which need to be changed as part of synchronization. And finally, the export of data. So exporting data will then go back to placing any changes to that synchronized user and putting them into, in this case, Active Directory. So I'll cancel out of that, and I'll go back to, I'll shut this down, and I'll go back to running the script. So that's all this particular script does. This might make a little more sense to you now. It's synchronizing from the HR system, which is the flat file management agent. It's then importing and synchronizing. It's synchronizing from the FIM database, so FIM, that portal is connected to a database which is separate, and that has been successful. And finally, synchronizing with AD, it's taking the data in the initial stage to exporting the data, doing a full import, which is also getting the schema data in there, and synchronizing that data. So it's essentially calling, this script is calling those run profiles, and it all appears to be successful. So I will minimize that. And we've just provisioned a new user, but don't trust me, we'll actually see if it's worked. So we'll go to the Denver server, which is the Active Directory server. These are the users which were beforehand, and I will just refresh that, and there we go. Sonny Bill Williams is the new user. So we've automatically provisioned a new user into the system, but as you can see, there's no workflow, there's no rules, there's no GUI modification, and that's what the extra stuff will do as part of this session. Any questions? Yeah.
If you extend the schema from your Active Directory at a later date after is that automatically reflected within the Active Directory management agent setup? So when you want to synchronize up on a rep view or another object?
Okay, the question was, just for people at the back, when and if you extend the Active Directory schema, is that reflected through the FIM GUI? The answer is you'd have to go through that configuration again. So when you put the credentials in again, it will see the new extension, and you can add that new object, you can add those new attributes to the object, but you will have to manually do that. It won't do any, it will see it the next time you log on to the AD management agent, but it won't have done any configuration.
Yeah, so when it does the import, it will actually read the schema into the connector space. So it will just open that connector again when it does it. Yeah, and you still need to go through and check the boxes to import the, or do the mapping. In the afternoon session, we're going to have a look at how to extend the FIM schema. So we'll have a look in some detail as to how to do that. So I encourage you to come along to that session as well.
Just to be clear, it's extending the FIM schema, not the AD schema.
Correct, yeah.
But the concept is the same. Any other questions? Yeah. The question is, can you include workflow for authorization in that case? Great question, because that's exactly what we're going to do in the second half of the session. We'll show you how to create a workflow so it sends off an email for authorization. All right, with that, I will hand over to myself. Describe the management agent configuration, already done. So now we're getting on to passwords. As I said before, FIM for many years has been able to do certificate management, certificate workflows, certificate provisioning onto smart cards as a credential format, which is great if you've got a pretty advanced organisation which uses smart cards. Not all organisations do, so the management of passwords is something which is pretty essential. So what FIM does, which is new to ILM 2007, it will allow you to ask users questions when they join the organisation or when they have been provisioned the software to their server or to their client machine for the first time. It will ask those users some personal questions which are defined by the administrators, colour of your first car, name of your first dog, things like that. So when they come back from holidays and they've forgotten their password, they log on to the Windows, or they can click on the Windows Gina and they're able to reset their password based on those simple questions and answers. As you saw in the Active Directory Management Agent, you can configure password synchronization. So when these users reset their password through the Windows Gina, through the management agents which accept password synchronization, you can then flow those passwords into connected data stores in a one-way fashion. So you can take that AD credential, that password, and flow it into the connected data stores so you're able to synchronize your passwords at the back end from any password reset, but most importantly, a user self-service password reset. So we'll go to an example and we'll go back to the demo again. Woodgrove Bank, as any bank or financial institution or any enterprise, lots of help desk calls, lots of people who go on holidays, and it's a pretty mundane thing for an overworked IT department to do. I'm sure you can all agree that there's better things for system administrators to do than do password resets. So it's a pretty good way to get a business case up and running at your organisation. So if you're trying to get management to do an identity management project and they want to see concrete reasons to go with this, then this is a pretty easy way to show the business case to get the work done that you want to do. So, password reset. We've created a brand new user, Sonny Bill. So we'll log on as him for the first time. Whoops, switch user. SBW. As part of the provisioning policy, he's been given a default password for the first time. And as you can see, it's further proof that the login has worked. So this is the first time Sonny Bill, he's been provisioned into AD successfully without workflow, but we'll show that a bit later. And now we're going to log on as the first time. And if everything's working correctly, he should be prompted to enter in some credentials. Actually, while this is logging on, I'll show you what is going to be happening behind the scenes. So we'll go back to the Stockholm server. So what is happening in the background is new users will be prompted with a certain workflow. So the workflow that is going to be fired, I'll just show you here. Password. So it's a password reset authentication workflow. So this is the workflow that Sonny Bill is going to fire in a minute. And this is all wizard based and you can create these quite simply, but I'll show you one that has been pre-created. So at this point you can define an authentication workflow which is based on a number of questions. We'll edit that. So as you can see, Sonny Bill will be asked 3 questions and you can modify the number. You can also modify the number which have to be answered correctly, and you can answer the number which is chosen from a greater pool to prevent social engineering attacks. It's here that you can actually define the nature of the question and obviously your HR policies and legal requirements. There's certain questions you can ask and certain questions you can't ask. Anything to add, Chris? You've been taken to HR a few times for asking inappropriate questions, but there's obviously things you can ask in organisations. All right, so this is the workflow that's going to be fired by the management policy rule, but we'll take that into a little bit more detail later on. We'll log back onto the Cairo server. Oops, unplanned stoppage. Shut that. Okay, so this is the prompt that's come up to Sonny Bill because this is the first day at his new job. And as you can imagine, he's going to be asked 3 questions after he does an authentication. at the start. So just to make sure he is who he says. And there you go. Questions that he's been asked for the first time. Player, name of the bird first kissed. I have no idea. It's probably himself. I want to make sure I get these right because I'll be asked them again. What city was your first job? Where is he in now? Is he in Christchurch? Christchurch.
Now, there are some best practices around asking some of these questions. And Paul made the reference to HR. We had a scenario where we were working with a customer, and it actually took us about 3 weeks to define the questions because HR determined that some of them were offensive to people. So things like, what's your mother's maiden name? There's, I guess, there's a security issue around that one because anybody can kind of socially engineer it. But people also may not have known their mother, so they may kind of find offence to it. So I guess the message here is, try and find a collection of both fact-based questions and knowledge-based questions. A question like, what's your favourite ice cream, is a pretty good one because it's knowledge-based. Somebody can't go out and research what your favourite ice cream is. They can't do a search on Bing or, your other favourite search engine on, discovering some of this information about a particular person. So, yeah, if you can find some of those fact-based questions, knowledge-based questions and incorporate those into the QA gate, that would be a great idea.
Okay, so Sonny Bill has come back from holidays, or he's come back from France, he's had a few head knocks, and he can't remember his password. Reset password, right here on the Gina, pretty obvious for people. One thing I want to emphasise, this is a domain-connected machine. So for self-service password reset to work, it has to be a domain-joined machine. So you have a kiosk in the workplace, or someone has taken it into the office. They reset their password. All right, what's my password again? Comes up with an authentication prompt, looking for the FIM service, and there he enters in his credentials. And if I remember that, so the answer, the question was, does it have to be exact typing? And the answer is yes, but not case sensitive.
So what we actually do is we convert it to all lowercase, we strip out extraneous characters, and we store that in the database. So
from here, Sonny Bill can reset his password without a help desk call, without the cost on being borne by IT, which is a great improvement for managing your users to get your IT staff to do things which are more important. Now with that, I do hand over to Chris.
Do we want to ask a couple of questions?
Yes, questions. Hey, Ben. So the question is, when you reset your passwords within FIM, will it honour the AD password policy requirements? Is that a good paraphrasing of your question? Good question, because that was actually a bug in FIM previously. So before, there was a design change request for that. So that is something that has been created, and it will be part of a patch for FIM. So previously,
And AD.
Sorry?
There's
and AD. Yeah, so previously that was a problem. People would reset their password within a period of time, or reset it maybe to the same password, which really was the issue. So if they had a password 1, 3 months later they reset it to password 1, there was a disconnect with AD. So there is going to be an update released for both AD and FIM to honour that. Next question. So the answer is, where are the answers kept, and are they encrypted? So the answer is yes, they are encrypted, and the answers are within the FIM database. Come along to the session after, and we'll show you some architecture on that. So the question is, what are the licensing requirements for password reset? Good question for a solution sales guy.
So there is for FIM 2010, there's a server license required. So that's required wherever you deploy the server software. And there is also a client access license for every registered user who uses any of the portal features, I guess. So, you know, the portal features include user self-service, workflow, and of course password reset as well. The only exception to that is if you're, for example, if you're a government department or if you're an organisation who's got a subsidiary or a partner that they deal with, and you wanted to define, you know, external entities in your database as well, you can acquire the external connector license, and that will cater for, you know, an unlimited amount of users. So the CAL. So the question is the CAL part of the eCAL or is it a separate CAL? It is definitely a separate CAL.
If we can leave the questions there, we'll take further questions at the recharge bar later on.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. So I guess I was really happy that you explained who Sonny Bill was, because I come from Melbourne. I don't know much about your game. You know, I play the game where you actually have to kick the ball to score. But anyway, that's probably a discussion for the recharge bar later on. Okay, so, you know, crashed and burned with that one. So let's talk a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about attribute change. So the thing is about, you know, somebody's tenure within the organisation, things change. People change their surname, they get married or they get divorced. In fact, Paul and I were having this discussion yesterday, and it's quite a serious matter. I had a person who changed their sex, therefore they changed their first name as well. So your policies, I guess, need to take into account some of these things. Now, that's probably one of the exceptions. But people also change their jobs, you know, they change their role. This sort of thing's happening all the time. And of course, each one of these changes either has to have HR involved, or the help desk has to be, you know, involved in the process as well, or the administrator for each one of the applications needs to be able to process that request. So I guess in the graphic, you know, that we're showing here, somebody needs to be advised of what that change is and then go out and touch each one of the applications. That change could be as simple as an attribute change, or that change could be a group change, you know, an addition or a removal into that group. Well, what we might be doing in that process as well is either delegating some ability for them to perform an action within the application, or removing access to an application. So it's not just a case of, you know, that provisioning process into the application, but we can also deprovision as well. So this is, I guess, where the cost is, and hence why identity management projects are so strategic in an IT sense. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and have a look at how we can start to implement some of that change and allow the users to be in control of that change. So the first example that we're going to look at is a white pages scenario. Organisations often ask, they say, well, look, you know, I want to be able to search for people within the company, but I also want to be able to give people access to the white pages so that they can update their phone number. So in this example, we're going to give Sonny Bill the ability to update his mobile phone because he's got his own phone that he's brought into the organisation. Therefore, we just want him to go in and update the white pages. Some people use Outlook as the white pages, and that works okay for searching. But how do you do the update? How do you change your phone number in that system? It's not easy, right? So let's go ahead and have a look at how we can do that. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll go to the Cairo server. You didn't change the password?
No, same password.
I'll log in as Sonny Bill. And I'll fire off Internet Explorer. I'm just going to go out and visit. I'll visit the FIM portal. Now, a few words about this FIM portal. So this is the UI that we, you know, allow users to be able to go in and do various tasks. As a user, I'm going to have less stuff that's displayed on that screen. So there's kind of a level of role-based access control, whereas when Paul was logging in as an administrator, there was a lot more stuff that was available to him. He may not have been delegated access, actually.
Yeah, I think if he's a user, he should be able to. Oh, you got to click on. click those credentials. It keeps it.
Okay. So notice that, because he's not an administrator, he gets access to less stuff. If we go through and have a look at my profile,
So with less stuff, if you remember that I clicked on a workflow before and I alluded to MPRs, obviously you don't want end users to be able to create workflows, to create management policy rules. So end users, as the default situation, don't have access to those kinds of features.
I should also state that this user interface is based on Windows SharePoint services. It's not a full SharePoint implementation, it's the Windows Server role. So it's a cut down version. It also, it implies from a licensing implication that SharePoint's not necessary, it comes standard with the Windows Server role. So a couple of things about this UI that we've just presented. We've done a search on our own personal information, and Sonny can see his first name, his last name, some other information, domain, etc. If we click over onto the contact info, notice that this attribute is now editable, so he can go ahead and update his personal details, but he can't update his mobile phone. So he can go ahead and click OK there, and if him comes back and says, well, this is the old value, this is the new value, and click on submit. We'd also have a search requests interface in the administrative screen, and in fact you can go out and you can query all the changes so you can see who made what change to who, where from, what the old value was, what the new value is. You can even export some of that data, or in fact all of the data, into another database, and you can use that as your reporting engine if you wanted to. Anyhow, I guess what we've seen here is that Sonny can go out and update his office phone number. We'd really like him to be able to update his mobile phone number. So the way that we do that is, let's go back into the Stockholm server. We've got this notion of the management policy rules, and these are really, really powerful set of rules. So it's a collection of workflows. We have the authentication workflows for things like password management that Paul talked about. We've got authorization workflows, which Paul's going to show next up, so when we require an approval for something. And we've also got the action workflow. So this is where we initiate, an action to do something. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to search on the policy rules. Now, I know that Sonny's a contractor, and I want contractors to be able to do a particular task. So this is the taxonomy, the science of classification. So I'm going to go out and do a search to find what policies apply to contractors. So, did you mention sets? Have you mentioned sets? Yeah. So a set is a type of collection. It's not a group. The term group is overused. It's kind of the fundamentals about that we use for role-based access control within FIM. So we've already gone out and done the taxonomy, and we've classified all the contractors dynamically using this set. So I'm going to go out and do a search for a set, and I'll say, find me all the sets that apply to contractors.
So you can see down here you've got MPRs, workflows, and sets is where you define the set. So a set could be all contractors.
So I've found one that applies to all contractors. I'll click next, and we can see that there's a management policy rule that says user management, user can change their attributes. So let's go through and edit that. And in this management policy rule, it tells me that all contractors can do a modify on a single value attribute, and that attribute is office phone. What I need to do is add mobile phone, but first I need to edit it. Okay, so going back in here, now it's in edit mode. What I'd like to do is add mobile phone. So I'll do a search on the attribute, find the attribute. So I've now added it. Click OK, submit it. Okay, close that. And now if I go back to Cairo, go out and do a search again of my profile, we can see that the mobile phone attribute is now editable. What's the correct number format? 22, is that right? Or 21? And then a bunch of digits. Would we normally just allow people to enter anything freeform? Probably not. So if you come to this afternoon session, you learn how to do that. Put some controls around validation of that data. Okay. There we have it. So that was an example of how we can start to enable white pages, not only for searching, but for also updating your own details. Notice as well, I didn't have to do any coding for that. So this is the declarative provisioning capability within Forefront Identity Manager that makes it easy for the IT pro to be able to go out, manipulate the UI, delegate the ability for people to perform an action. Let's take a couple of questions quickly on that. Any questions? One back here. That is a great question. So we could use a temporal set for that. I will replay the question.
Yes, replay.
So the question was, can we use FIM to ask people to confirm their details? So they can submit the data, and then maybe in 3 months' time, we fire off a notification to them and ask them to validate that their phone number is correct.
Yeah, so within FIM you have the concept of what's called a temporal set, which is a time-based set. So you can have a set which only lasts for 30 days, for example. So that person can join, 30 days later there's a change that happens. So it'll take some configuration, but you can do that based on a time-based set. So you could have a set after 30 days, fires off an action, which is an email saying please log into the FIM portal and restate your credentials, something like that. So will take configuration, but can be done based on temporal sets. Any other questions? Okay.
No?
With that,
Okay, so the question is, can we have a single management policy rule that allows us to update attributes, or can we apply multiple management policy rules based on role? So most definitely you can apply multiple. Now, I guess the way that you slice it and dice it really depends on your business. In the example that we gave here, we delegated the contractors the ability to update their office phone and mobile. What I could have done is I could have said all managers are allowed to update the mobile phone number and the office phone number for all of their staff. So I can apply that sort of management policy rule as well. Or I can say all the, maybe there's an office manager within a building, and that office manager can modify the phone number for everybody within that building. Okay, so everybody at that location. So we can kind of drive it on all those sorts of attributes. Absolutely, you can have multiple policies. Okay.
next section.
So then,
Sorry, I went ahead one on you.
It, haven't we?
No, I went ahead one on you. So
Yeah.
Samantha is promoted to a leadership role.
Okay. So we've talked about attributes. Now let's have a look at how we can enable change for things like groups. So the scenario is somebody is maybe promoted to a leadership role. She becomes a manager, and we want to have all of her staff into a group and distribution list. Again, this would probably require a change from the help desk, or maybe we have a new project team. The project leader, goes to the help desk and asks for a group to be created with all the project members within it, because there's no definition in HR about who's working on this special project. So let's go ahead and have a look at how the FIM user interface, this is the administrative screen again, but we can actually delegate the ability to users to be able to manage their own groups and distribution lists as well, if that's what your organisation requires. Okay, so I will get out of that and go back into the administrative screen of Forefront Identity Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new security group. I can do a search and I can see that there's already a bunch of security groups there, finance, sales, etc. What I'd really like to do is create a new group for Sam's reports. I can make it mail enabled, so a distribution list will be created in Exchange. I give it an alias. And what I can now define is 3 different types of groups. So there's a radio button there. I can make it manual. So this is the traditional method where I go out and create a group and just drag all the users into the group. That's pretty simple. I can make it manager based. So if I've got the manager defined as an attribute within the FIM database, so I'm pulling that out of SAP, I can make it manager based. In fact, that example at Microsoft, what happens is in SAP, when somebody is promoted to become a manager, it fires off a rule, goes ahead and creates a group called Paul Conroy's Direct Reports. We also drag all the direct report data, we find all the aliases, and we make them a member of the group. So that is defined once, and then, forever, as people move from one job to another, they will be automatically removed from one group and added to another. So it's a really simple way of kind of reducing that overhead of managing groups. I want to take it a step further though. I want to show you the declarative provisioning model in the FIM UI. So I'm going to make it criteria based. I'll go ahead and I'll click next. And now I've got this natural language provisioning tool which allows us to go out and create the policy. So I can define the user object type. I'm just going to say, or the object type, I'm going to say user, and I can define all or any of the below conditions. And I can say the attribute type is manager. I could spell. And the operator might be is or is member of, etc., etc. And I'll do a search on Sam. Samantha Smith is who I'm looking for. And I also want to see where their employee type is contractor. Make sure you don't do any spelling mistakes there. And their department is finance. So I can make it quite granular, and if I do a view members there, I can see all the people that meet that condition. I can define the owner. The owner will be Sam. Click next, submit. And what will happen now, that script that's running in the background will actually go out and start to synchronize that information with Active Directory. So we'll go out and provision the distribution list, create the security group and all that sort of stuff. Now I'm logged in as an admin, so I can do that as an administrator. I can perform that action as an administrator, but as I said, you can delegate that ability out to your users so that they can perform either the updating or the creation of the groups as well and the distribution list. That's a choice that you can make. Once again, using the example of Microsoft, we give our staff the ability to do that, and there's about 400,000 groups within our environment for over 100,000 staff, but the help desk hardly has to do anything. So MSIT doesn't have much activity at all in that, so the costs are actually low even though there's so many groups. So let's go back into the Denver server and do a refresh. And there's Sam's reports there. We can see who the members are as well. Okay, so again, very easy provisioning activity that has allowed us to easily manage groups, and we could also delegate the ability out to users to be able to perform that action.
So you probably noticed that Chris didn't need to have access to Active Directory's users and computers, didn't have to log on to a domain controller, so those kinds of changes could be made by people with delegated administration rights, which is a powerful thing.
Now that we're running late,
Yep.
I might skip the questions and go to the last.
Great idea. So
Last
we've
hour.
just got a few minutes to go, and we'll take you into the best part, and it's worth hanging around for because we'll give away the jackets at the end, so we won't forget that. So we'll bring it all together in that workflow-based activities. We've briefly looked at sets, we've briefly looked at workflows and MPRs, and we'll do exactly as the question asked us to do, was put in a workflow that doesn't automatically put new people into AD, or puts on a workflow when changes are made. So now we're going to get Sunny to change departments, and we don't want it automatically to happen. We want to create a workflow which is fired, which requires an email to be sent out to either his boss or the HR manager before that takes place. So we'll log on back to the Stockholm server, and we'll make this full view, full screen mode. Shut that down. So what we have here is a workflow. So we'll create a new workflow, which we'll call demo needs approval. No, we won't. We'll create a new workflow, which says demo needs approval. So there's three types of workflows: authentication, action, and authorization, which is the type of workflow we will create. This will be an approval workflow, which will in fact be an email that gets sent out. So here you have a whole bunch of default configurations. You can have someone automatically put in as an approver, and we'll call it Brian, who's the HR manager, but you can also have a look up, and we'll say the target and their manager. So this will in fact send out an email to the manager of the person who's either created or modified, which is nice. So it'll send out an email to Sunny Bill's boss. You can have number of approvals, so if, say, my manager's away, the other people can do the approval. A duration, which is a number of days before an escalation happens to their manager. It's always a good way to boost productivity, is if people know that after a couple of days their manager's going to get notified. And out of the box you've got all these default templates, which are functional but are very, very ugly, so you'd obviously want to skin them yourselves, put your own company logo. So there you have it. In about 30 or 60 seconds, I've created a brand new workflow, which means an email will be sent to both the target and the HR manager.
So I could have chained a notification to that process as well, so maybe I can incorporate it with a service desk system. So after an approval has either been approved or an action like that has happened, send a notification to the service desk saying, maybe in fact before it happens we'll open a docket. So that's the first notification. Then we hit the approval, we receive that. Once it's been complete, send another notification to the service desk saying close the docket off. Then you've got a reporting mechanism to see how many changes you've had in the month.
So we've created the workflow. Finally, the management policy rule, the MPR, which states when that workflow will be fired. We've created one which is add user into AD, MPR. So anytime a new user is added to AD or a change is made to that particular person, this workflow is fired. So at the moment, it is the AD user workflow is fired. And
Further up, that's the
further
action.
on, we want the authorization. There we go. So we'll also fire the demo needs approval workflow as well. We'll submit that. So now, before any changes are made to Sunny Bill, then a workflow will be sent to either his manager or the person managing it, or the person who is the HR manager, in this case, Brian Perry. So we'll search for the user, SVW. We'll make a modification, so we'll change his mobile phone number again. So as you can see, before we added a new user, so an approval is now required. We go to the Cairo server. We log off. as Sonny Bill, and we switch user as either his manager, Samantha, or Brian. And Brian will have waiting for him an email which looks like a meeting request where he has to approve that particular meeting request and move before Sonny Bill's change will go into Active Directory. Brian can do it through the Outlook client, or he can also do it through the web-based interface. So there we go, pending approval. So we've got, before that change is made to Sonny Bill's account, you can see Brian or Sonny Bill's manager has to approve this, or if he doesn't agree with the changes that have been made, he can reject that particular change. So looks like a meeting request. If the users don't use Exchange or the Outlook client, they're able to go to the web-based interface and approve requests through there. So with that, I'll go down to the summary. So thanks very much for your patience. It's been a session where we've packed a lot of information into it. So if you have any questions, come and meet us at the recharge bar afterwards, where we want to hammer home these final things. So with an identity management project, you want to be able to connect the disparate data stores so you have automated, comprehensive and workflow-based approvals. If you do that, you'll be able to meet these requirements of giving power to your users and taking away those mundane tasks away from the IT team. You're able to deliver real business benefit to your organisation. You can say we're going to save on X amount of help desk calls a month. And finally, you're going to have increased security and compliance. So those effects are pretty obvious with an identity management project. So with that, we'll hand out a couple of jackets. I've got a question, and I'll give Chris some time to think of one himself. So hands up, first one, I'll throw out a jacket. For workflows, there are 3 types of workflows. Can anyone name all 3 types of workflows that can be created? Bueller. Can anyone name 2 types of workflows that can be created? Okay, I saw the guy up in the black there. Sorry? Standard managed, that is not the case. The guy behind him. So the answer is not quite right. So authentication. So the answer is authentication and action. So yes, there are 3 types: authentication, authorization, and action. So I'll give you a jacket at the end. Thank you.
Okay, and so my question is, first hands up, how many management agents come out of the box with Vim 2010? 10 is not quite right. 20 is the correct answer.